Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life.
What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to the 817 podcast, where we talk about the lovely city of Fort Worth, Texas. We get into politics, business, culture, news. If it impacts you as a resident, we discuss it. We expand our news past just the city. We do county, we do state, and boy, do we have an episode for you today, as our big story is an interview with Beto O'Rourke.
So, yeah, we have Beto O'Rourke today. We had to do an interview a little bit earlier in the week and now finishing up our podcast over the weekend in our regular scheduled time. But it was great to see Beto via FaceTime on a Zoom call. And as he travels the state, trying to get more people to register to vote. So I guess we're on the same team.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for those of you who may be new to this, because you are from the Beto's kind of ecosystem, we are the 817 podcast, where we do 3 short stories, 1 big story, wins and losses every week about Fort Worth, Texas, Tarrant County, as we see, and what you'll learn in the interview is how influential Tarrant County is in the politics of to the state and even to the country. So here we go. So we're going to go ahead and dive into story number 1. We're going to update from the Tarrant County Jail shenanigans happening at the jail with the death of Anthony Johnson. I also, for context for anyone, I would also highly recommend the last episode, as it was probably our most informative, news-heavy episode. Because what's also interesting about our episodes is it's really dictated by the news that's going on in the week. So when holidays like Memorial Day is here, the news is a little slower that week. So last week we had a ton of things we talked about.
Well, and I can't remember if we skipped a week right before that. So maybe we had more time to catch up on some articles, but it definitely was a news heavy week. And I think this week we started looking around trying to think how we were going to flesh this pod out. And so we have some updates, like you said. So that first story, looking back at what's going on in Tarrant County, we've had a lot of focus more on Tarrant County recently than we had in the past. The city's probably feeling a little bit of relief. We're not so concentrated on them.
Well, I did, Crane did reach out, I did get to see Crane after my little comment on the last episode. Michael Crane, City Council Member, District 3.
Yes.
So, but yeah, I saw him at an event, and he sat right next to me, and we got to discuss my little comment on the last episode, which I basically just told him, if you're going to be right of Maddie Parker, you will get acknowledged for being more right than Maddie Parker. If you get more centered to the left, I will also acknowledge that, because what ultimately we need at our leadership is centered politicians. And unfortunately, their party, which we'll discuss is moving much further to the right. So let's go ahead and dive into this Tarrant County update again. Sheriff Wayborn said Thursday 2 jailers fired last week after the in-custody's death of Anthony Johnson has been reinstated. Wayborn said the termination of Officer Rafael Moreno and Lieutenant Joe Garcia were withdrawn after he was advised to do so by attorneys with the Civil Division of the Tarrant County District Attorney's Office. He, quote, "In my opinion, the AD investigation had reached a point that would allow for termination. The Tarrant County District Attorney's Office advised that the additional steps must be taken in order to appropriately complete the process under the rules of civil service," Wayborn said in his statement. So to give you kind of context, what also has happened, if this is your first time hearing this, Anthony Johnson, a 31-year-old Marine vet who also had medical needs, and his family was looking for support for him, at the end of the day was in jail, was not being responsive to a regular check-in, which then led to a jailer having his knee on his back for over 90 seconds and Anthony Johnson not being here with us today. And so this is an ongoing issue going on at the Tarrant County, where under Bill Wayborn's watch, we have seen higher deaths than past sheriffs. So honestly, I think this right here just kind of shows like the lack of policies and strategies that he probably should have taken. And it seemed like he was trying to use these young jailers as the way out, the scapegoats to the problem. And now they have lawyered up, and their lawyers have also asked for the full footage, and because they believe that they're also being scapegoated. And then you also see Commissioner Simmons saying that, our sheriff is not even being correctly responsible on how to handle the situation, and the people he is trying to keep accountable. And so it just looks bad for him having to come back off of his first one because he was gone for a while. And when you're gone for a while, not saying anything, you should come and show up with the correct process and flow to be back here saying, oh, my bad, I can't actually fire those people.
It's not even the attorneys for the person who died that are telling him that this process wasn't correct. It's his own attorneys telling him that the process wasn't correct. So he says he might not agree with that, but I don't think he's a lawyer, so he should definitely be listening to the attorneys. But you pointed out the comment about the extraction from the cell, and that was something that we got some information about as well, where there are different jails that handle that differently. There are some jails that have specific teams that are trained specifically for removing people from their cells when there's resistance to that. And, after watching the video, we thought that not being an expert in that area, I don't know what the proper procedures are, but it seemed to me that you might be able to use the benefit of time to not get yourself into a situation like that. And maybe if people were trained in that arena, they would be able to employ some of those techniques and not end up in the situation that they ended up in. And we do have an article from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram that says that Sheriff Wayborn says that Tarrant County doesn't need a SWAT-like geared up team to keep inmates safe. We did receive some additional information from the staff of Commissioner Elisa Simmons, who indicated that they've done some research into jails that have those types of teams. And I think there's some differences of opinion about how those teams work and operate. And so I would definitely agree with, not having people in SWAT-like gear, because that's probably the opposite of getting the results that you're trying to get when you're trying to do those difficult extractions, especially if someone is experiencing a mental health crisis. But I think that if you study how different jails handle it, there are different ways of handling it that may be beneficial in the long run and not end up in results like we had in this case.
Yeah, and then the other part of this story to update is there seems to be more news and more video that the family has been able to see. So the family has been, throughout all their challenges and the recent events in their lives, they still have found time to do the hard things and advocate for Anthony Johnson, but then just also advocating for more information and accountability. They've been able to see more footage, and based off what the family has been able to see, unreleased video that the public hasn't seen, the mother and two sisters are saying, hey, we're also going to say that JPS Health Network is partially responsible for Anthony Johnson's death. And really the kicker of why that, they kind of just say that based off the footage, that once he was there for 90 seconds. Once they got up, it took 8 minutes. It took 8 minutes between the times the jailer found him to be unresponsive and the medical staff to begin resuscitation measures. They also say that they smacked him, tried to rub his chest to make sure he wasn't faking. He was lifeless, like a rag doll. I can't express it in any other way, said one of the family members who was quoted. And so now there's just even this kind of also piece of just like the JPS not seeing this video. JPS hasn't said anything. And what is their responsibility in all of this? So we're now going to move into short story number 2, which you guys have all known because in this episode we talk about this, but we have an election on Tuesday, the 28th. And so you just got back getting sunburned from Memorial Day. You thought you just get back to work, but we also need you to find time to go vote on May 28th because early voting's over. And I voted early.
And I did not.
But I'm not going to be here Tuesday, which is why I did
It's so funny.
it.
Well, and I've done that too. In the past, I always voted on Election Day because my thought process was, what if something happens between the end of early voting and Election Day that changes my mind about
that's
a candidate?
Good point.
So I always wanted to make sure that I knew all of the information. Now, I did that until I was on a ballot. And then I was like, holy cow, everybody, go out there and vote early so that I don't have to sweat it. So then I started voting early. And even after the time I wasn't on a ballot anymore, I continued to vote early just because I didn't want there to be some kind of slip up where maybe I wasn't available to vote on Election Day because I wouldn't want to miss voting. Yeah. But in this one, I just let early voting get by me, and I haven't voted yet. But I will definitely be voting on Tuesday because I will be in town.
Yeah, and so go ahead. We have 4 races that are on a runoff, and so can you break those down for us?
Yes. So there is a at the more local level, there's the Tarrant County Tarrant County Commissioner Precinct 1 candidates are making a final push ahead of their runoff. And so that is a race between Kathleen Hicks and Roderick Miles. We've talked a lot about that race. And so they're both availing themselves of this opportunity to share with the public why folks should support each of them. So that's a Fort Worth Report article talking about that runoff. So then going from the more local of the county, we can go all the way up to federal. We have Granger's seat, which is open, and there is a runoff on the Republican side for that race. And that is our currently state representative Craig Goldman running against businessman John O'Shea. And each of them is vying for Granger's seat. And that is the split in the GOP. Whereas on the Democrat side, there is a candidate for that race as well, but there is no runoff. So that will not be on your ballot.
Which sneak peek will be what we're going to talk about in short story number 3 is the GOP as they had their priorities and their convention this weekend in Dallas. But going to this, like I think we constantly bring up that this podcast has much been a conversation around how the financial capitalists centered Republicans of Tarrant County and Fort Worth is fighting against the far right white nationalists, kind of more conspiracists, conservatives that are taking over their election. And we saw in the county when Betsy Price ran against Tim O'Hare and Tim O'Hare won in that situation. We're saying that whatever kind of happens in this seat, it's really going to dictate where is the party going. And we also get to talk about that with kind of Beto O'Rourke a little bit as well. So, like, what is your take on, like, I feel like that the centered, the Maddies, the Betsies, the Michael Cranes, whoever, did not jump on the Craig Goldman train loud enough that if he does lose, when do these people start taking accountability of losing their party? Happen once, it could happen twice. And so what's kind of your take there?
It goes back to, like, the tactics used by and whether or not folks want to use those same tactics. I hearken it to, they are looking to have kind of the more centrist, sane person, in my opinion, represent them. But they're not wanting to jump into the fray of the stuff that people are doing on the other extreme of putting up, red signs that say these completely negative things that aren't even actually based in complete fact. And so they don't want to get into it tit for tat in that arena.
That makes sense.
If you go look for the information, you can see the mailers that have been coming to my house do list who is backing different candidates. But I do see more, and this is anecdotal, when people are sharing on their social media, they're saying, just go vote. But I do the same thing. I don't always put out specifically who I'm voting for. But I know if you go look for it, you can see that the people you just mentioned are backing Craig Goldman in this race. And so it's infuriating because the easy...
but like, look at like Roderick Miles' campaign, for example. Like, it's just like, you could just clearly tell the entire like establishment is like endorse. And Royce Brooks blessing. And it's just like, I just don't know why a bigger campaign like Goldman's for Granger's seat, how is Roderick Miles' seat feeling more aligned in his establishment than his seat, which has much more bigger ramifications?
I think there's different ways of campaigning when you're campaigning at a local county level versus, because it's not just Tarrant County. So there may be stuff going on more broadly that we're not seeing here in Tarrant and in Fort Worth when it comes to Granger's seat, because it goes, further out to the west.
Yeah. You said we also had 2 others that we need.
So there's
to be
one
mindful
other
of?
runoff for District 97, which is open because of the fact that Craig Goldman is running for Granger's seat. So there's a Texas House District 97 Democrat runoff election to be decided on May 28th as well. That is between Carlos Walker and Diane Simmons. And then there's a runoff in that race on the Republican side as well, which is between Cheryl Bean and
Mick Liberal.
No. Now you're getting into the politics of it all. John McQueenie.
Yeah. But that's what was funny because he donated. Because what it's funny. I thought that I found it humorous.
Apparently, he owns McDonald's franchises, and in his capacity of owning McDonald's franchises, has contributed to a PAC that McDonald's owns as a whole, and then that PAC has contributed to different things, and some of those things have been deemed liberal by the folks that are trying to beat him, and so they're calling him McLiberal.
I find it hilarious.
It's a lot of battling going on, and all of that points out to me. I've always felt like you should tout what it is that you bring to the table and your strengths and what it is that you're planning to do for the community, not
but that doesn't,
bash the other person.
Unless you're Beto or Obama and you got the woo like that. I don't know. Not everyone has the woo like that.
It makes me crazy. The mailings that I've been seeing are just so insane. And picking like the worst possible picture that you can find of a person and then shadowing it or putting a tint to it.
And now with AI, you're going to be able to have them talk and do all different other type stuff.
That is
but
terrifying.
Also, I didn't have this, the Carlos Walker one on my ballot.
Right. I have all of these.
Yeah. And I know you guys are probably wondering like who to vote for and all that jazz. We had 2 interviews with one with Roderick Miles and Kathleen Hicks. You can go back and see. We'll put them in the show notes so you can watch them and make your decision for Tuesday. Or you can be one of those people who didn't vote in the primary and you can vote for the Kate Granger seat that's up against Craig Goldman and John O'Shea. So, I've seen in our direct messages on our platforms that people have taken that Republican approach and made some moves and strides that way. So for those of you who did vote in the primary or you feel like you can't remove yourself from being a Democrat to vote in the Republican side, which is also something we're going to talk about in short story number 3, my recommendation and how I looked at who I voted for, which you will never know who I voted for. Not even Ann will know. My wife asked, and I said, I can't tell you. But at the end of the day, I looked at this is the 2 things I asked myself. Which one does Tim O'Hare don't want most? That was number 1. Number 2 was which one is going to help Elisa Simmons continue to do amazing work and support her? And so based off of what you hear from people, you can decide which one Tim O'Hare doesn't want most, and who Elisa Simmons would like to have as her tag team partner in the county commissioner's office court. Cool. So let's go ahead and move into short story number 3.
So short story number 3 is basically taking a look at the GOP's priorities. And we have hinted at this throughout the first 2 stories a couple of times, but there was a GOP convention
this weekend. We had Ted Cruz speak on Saturday, so there was a lot going on. And it's interesting because, the NRA convention not too far away either. So it's
we mentioned that in our last pod.
A lot's going on.
The GOP platform was proposed for Texas at this convention, and there's a Texas Tribune article titled Proposed Texas GOP Platform Calls for the Bible in Schools, Electoral Changes That Would Lock Democrats Out of Statewide Office. So I think that would also impact the suggestion that has been made by numerous people that you could influence outcomes in Republican races if you voted in Republican primaries. I think they're looking to not allow that to happen in the future and to make folks get a majority in like all counties in order to be elected. And so that would take away the ability to the populous urban cores to have as the influence that they should have, in my opinion, because it's numbers of people versus the more far-flung areas that don't have are not as populous, but giving those less populous counties more of an influence on the outcomes of races.
Basically, all 3 of these things would be really bad, and would make the progress of what we're doing in Texas and the things we discussed with the interview with Beto even harder. But I find it interesting that like the whole registering, like you had to be. I don't even know how you do that. How would you register someone to make sure they're a Republican to then be able to vote in the primary?
I mean, I think other states do have a registration process where people are registered Republicans or registered Democrats. They don't have that in Texas. So I guess that means that it is possible. And that could be something that they could change to make it. But it seems like I think people should be willing to vote the person. And this just, in my opinion, seems to be pushing us to, more stringent encampments of being only on this side and only on that side, and lends itself to less cooperation. But that may be the point.
Yeah, and but then to me it would just like pull my decisions to if I wanted to follow the process of hey, we need to vote for the most sane Republican person, then that just means I would have to register with the Republican Party. And so if you did do it, you would just really, really have to commit to doing it. Like, it's no there and bounce back, there and bounce back. They're making that harder.
Yeah.
And so, so the cause of this is that now seems a lot of exhausting if I want to vote in an important Democrat race. And because then I ended up getting stuck trying to do this whole Republican thing. And that makes more radical right primaries winners, because now the people who do, the independents or the Democrats who do vote on the Republican side, bring the tide back. So the Craig Goldmans could possibly win.
Yeah. And going on in this article, they talk about that the other proposed planks for this 50-page platform include proclamations that abortion is not healthcare, it is homicide, that gender transition treatment for children is child abuse. They're calling to reverse recent name changes to military bases and publicly honor the Southern heroes, and the support for declaring gold and silver as legal tender, and demanding that the U.S. government disclose all pertinent information and knowledge about UFOs. So it was interesting to see who showed up at this convention and spoke and who didn't. I think it appears to me to be more of the extreme right that shows up and speaks at these things, and other people are kind of either staying away or staying silent there. And again, that goes back to your question about, are you going to speak up and allow this even further pull to the extremes continue to rule the day in your party? And
the Texas GOP convention is in San Antonio. The NRA convention was in Dallas. I think I could have mixed some of that up for us. I know Senator Ted Cruz also spoke on Saturday, and so we have that article here to kind of like what that propaganda is. So I think he's always been a master facilitator of the propaganda that keeps him elected. But to me, the part here that I also found like passionate about all this is like, this propaganda is what makes, we have proof and evidence that these are the same words and things people were using in mass shootings that happened in Texas, like Allen, Texas. And there has been call to actions to stop behaving or making these kind of conspiratorial sayings about universities or about making about social issues. And so I think that's very unfortunate that, we're still seeing them double down on this rhetoric when it creates a lot of anger out of vulnerable Texans who don't know any better.
Yeah, he basically says it's a battle, not a battle between Republicans and Democrats. It's a battle between conservatives and liberals, and then goes on to say it's a battle between sane and crazy.
And to me, like, I understand the battle between conservative and liberal, and most people sit in the middle. Most people are very moderate, and that's something that, as someone who I identify relatively liberal, even though Crane said to me, he when me and Michael Crane talked, he said, "You're actually not. I don't think you're that liberal." And I'm like, honestly, what's tough with me as a person is I'm someone who easily is not afraid to vote in the Republican Party, but then I think people who are like way more liberal than I am don't think I'm liberal at all because of maybe some things I'm passionate about, but then some people think because I run a business and I'm more of a moderate. So it is really confusing to figure out where you land in this world. But I do agree with Ted Cruz that is probably more what this is a battle of, because then you see that same battle with like inside parties. It's like, are you more centered in the moderate section pulling back over to liberalness if you're on the right side, and then if you're on the Democrat side and on the Republican side, are you pulling more closer to conservative?
And that's what highlights the frustration for me is that they're forcing people to pick a side and stay as completely entrenched in that side as possible.
Yeah.
And I think that's what leads to turmoil, upheaval, and things just being terrible.
And especially because a lot of state and local politics is simply just getting things done that shouldn't even be
Partisan.
political. Yeah,
exactly.
Like roads, schools, fire,
lumping all of that into being
energy,
Yep.
and it's like, why are we battling about these things? And that's the other part that that I always think, like, man, Governor Abbott and Ted Cruz has done such a good job of, like, they've been in office for so long, yet Texans today will still blame their economy and their local issues on the federal government and Joe Biden. Biden did it, right? Like, it's like, how can Governor Abbott and Cruz be leading this much, and we never say, you know what, I'm tired of this, and blaming them? Like, they do such a good job of leading the entire state and get no blame for what actually happens in Texas. Also, I do actually want to hit one more part that I find very interesting that I want to just acknowledge here. Texas GOP elected Abram George as their lead for the Texas GOP. Now, Abram George seems just like a normal Texas name, but I find this fascinating. He's from Tarrant County. He immigrated here when he was 16 from India with his family. He's an Indian Asian American, and we talked a lot about that. That is the fastest growing population in Texas. And we also talk about the median wealth. I just find it interesting that the GOP has identified a influential person of color to lead in the state as well. So I just wanted to put that. And he's from Tarrant County, which, if Tarrant is no longer going to be your largest red county, then it gets passed to Collin. So I just think that's very interesting as well. So I wanted to make sure I acknowledge that.
And he basically says that he wants to make it difficult on incumbents who aren't in lockstep with the party's agenda. So carrying on with what we were just talking about in the last short story.
Well, we're at the moment where we get to sit down with Beto O'Rourke, and he does not need an introduction, but we're going to go ahead and give him one. Beto O'Rourke is a fourth-generation Texan, born and raised in El Paso, where he has served as a small business owner, a city council representative, and a member of Congress. He founded and currently leads Powered by the People, a Texas-based organization that works to expand democracy and produce democratic victories through voter registration and direct voter engagement. Powered by the People has helped register over 250,000 unregistered Texans to vote since its inception in December 2019. Here is Beto O'Rourke.
My Fort Worth story starts really when I was a kid. My aunt lived just outside of Fort Worth when I was growing up, and so I would go out to visit her. And then as I got older, kind of passing through, or every now and then, a family vacation might take us to Fort Worth or the area, Six Flags, for example. But it really wasn't until I was running for United States Senate and then traveling with Powered by People and then running in 2022 for governor that I really spent quality time in Fort Worth and really got to know the community, got to know the people, got to know the history. And no one really embodies that more for me than Opal Lee. And just getting to spend time with her, listening to her, talking with her, hearing about her story, her life, her experiences in Fort Worth at a time where it was heavily segregated, very violent, and incredibly dangerous for a Black family like hers to move into what had previously been an all-white neighborhood and have their home burned down on Juneteenth. And then to see her from that literally rise from the ashes and lead a national effort to commemorate Juneteenth as a federally recognized holiday, culminating in her winning the Presidential Medal of Freedom just a few weeks ago. So the fact that I've gotten to meet Opal Lee, that I spent time with her in Fort Worth, really is just one of the high honors of my life, and certainly is the first thing I think about when I think about Fort Worth.
Yeah, and I remember, Beto, you joining her on the walk in the 100-degree weather when you were running, and we were out there and we did the 2 miles, and she still did it herself, still moving strong, and we ended up at the new City Hall.
She not only did it, I believe she was pushing the stroller of her great grandchild while she was doing it. Like everybody else is just trying to keep up on their own 2 feet. And here she was pushing somebody else as well. Yeah, she's amazing.
Well, we're really excited to kind of dive in just kind of how you know, as a leader, as someone who sees all of Texas, how do you look at Fort Worth and Tarrant County as a strategy to make Texas more progressive, to make blue more real, to make people feel like they're seen in a time when it just seems like you know, the red wave or the GOP is really taking the state of Texas. So I feel Tarrant County and Fort Worth has this opportunity because it's a big city, but it's the closest purple city compared to when you look at Dallas, San Antonio, and Houston. It just became the 12th biggest city in America, only 2,000 behind Austin. So it has this thing, but you're still looking at that Cowtown culture, the kind of the conservatives within it. And so just navigating here, how do you see it playing out, and how could we be more mindful as local people who want to see the things you champion become true?
Tarrant County is just one of the most exciting places in America for some of the reasons you gave, just how quickly it's growing, what it represents to the rest of the country and really the rest of the world about who we are as Texans, kind of the legend, the myth, and then just the reality. You know, anyone who visits Fort Worth is just blown away by the diversity in the community, by the deep culture, the history, the dynamism of the Fort Worth economy. It's just really this amazing place. And there's a reason why so many people move to Fort Worth and to Tarrant County. Politically, as you know, it's still the largest reliably read urban county in the United States of America. We won it in 2018 when I was running for Senate. You know, Joe Biden won it in 2020 when he was running for president. It is a county that is quickly moving into the Democrats' column, not overnight, maybe not tomorrow or even this cycle, but it is going to happen. It's a matter of time and effort. And what really gets me is there are so many people in Tarrant County who are making the effort, who aren't just willing to wait and allow this to happen of its own due course. They want to speed that process. So just a few weeks ago, I was on the TCU campus, for example, you know, that hotbed of liberal and progressive activism. You know, it gets written off as a really conservative place, but the students I met, the volunteers I met, you know, folks who were part of the Bright Divinity School, I was just really impressed. We ended up registering a lot of students. We ended up staying in touch with a lot of those students to make sure that they turn out and vote. And we did all of that with homegrown volunteers in Tarrant County. So a really special, important, critical place. And I know a million people have said this before me, but, you know, as goes Tarrant County, so goes the rest of the state. And as goes Texas, so goes the rest of the country. So, you know, no pressure on Tarrant County, but the 254 counties in Texas, this one is really the most pivotal.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have I have children who chose not to stay in Texas, and I know that is kind of a trend that we see a little bit with the young people in Tarrant County. I am working hard to do things here that would make this a place that my kids would want to come back to, but at the present time, that's not what they're seeing. So it's nice to hear you say that there's been positive things with the interactions that you've had with the young people in Tarrant County specifically.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think one thing to remind ourselves of, and I've got kids who are coming of age and will make a decision about where they want to live in the world soon, is, you know, some of these places might not yet be where we want them to be, but as long as they're moving in that direction, I think there can be something really exciting about being part of that. You know, if they were moving in the other direction, if we were losing these communities and losing hope in our future, you know, then I can understand. But I mean, I think this is a great place for young people to come to and literally be on the ground floor of deciding what Fort Worth, what Tarrant County, what Texas will become. And so that's something that gets me about the community.
Yeah, I sometimes tell people that you can always go where somebody else has already done the work and everything's already done, but a chance to be in a place where you get to influence that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
we're also looking at, Tarrant County is very large, and so that kind of creates the challenge. Looking at local elections, we don't get any real turnout. And I think it was 6.5% our last election that just passed by. What is it feels like the state does this on purpose, kind of this voter fatigue and making a lot of these weird off elections where important stuff is happening, but we're just not activating during those times.
Or we're only activating during those times instead of, and then it just flares up and goes away, flares up and goes away.
Yeah. And so Tarrant's sitting on, our county is in the news a lot right now for a lot of different reasons. And so it's honestly been the main course of our show for the last couple of weeks.
For a lot of time, we focus a lot on cities, but lately there's been a lot of activity at the county level. And I don't know how much attention you've been paying, but it has been very challenging. And part of it is, I was thinking back to the time that you and Representative Hurd went across the country together and how that bipartisan relationship was important to you and you guys were willing to work together. And I see the opposite of that from our county elected leaders here, where they literally say that they're there to represent only one side. And I don't know how you attack that.
Yeah, well, you're right about, part of the challenge, which is very low levels of voter participation. And I think you're also right about the fact that that's not an accident, that is a feature, not a bug of the system as designed by those who currently hold power in Tarrant County, who hold power in the state legislature and who hold power in the governor's, lieutenant governors, and attorney general's offices. They have made Texas the toughest state in the nation, bar none, in which to cast a ballot, the toughest state in the nation in which to get registered to vote, to participate in our politics. And there's so many ways they've done this, from voter ID laws to ballot drop-off locations to mail-in voting changes that have occurred over the last two legislative sessions, to this really obscene gerrymander of our state House, state Senate, congressional districts that do something really pernicious. They don't say you cannot vote, but they draw you out of a district where your vote might have some power to decide the outcome into a district where your vote will have almost no power to do that. And very often they're doing this along racial and ethnic lines. And that's been a finding not just of people like me, but of sitting federal judges who've described Texas as a racial gerrymander. So all of this leads to an abysmal level of voter turnout that doesn't reflect laziness, doesn't reflect that we don't love our democracy. It doesn't reflect that we don't care about these issues. It just reflects the way that we've descended into something less than a real democracy. And the only way to overcome it, absent intervention by the Department of Justice and the enforcement of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which I don't see forthcoming, is for us to go out there and do this really important, but also really hard work of registering voters, and then importantly, staying in touch with those voters over the duration of the election cycle. And to your point, beyond that, we don't want to just hear from people about voting and democracy, politics and elections and public policy when we want their vote. We want to reach out to them and find out what's important in their lives and remind one another that democracy also involves going to the county commissioners court meeting and speaking, going to the school board meeting and holding those in these positions of public trust accountable. We're losing out on that civic culture that I think used to be a real hallmark of Texas. And we're losing out on it because those in power, I think, fear those who can check their power. And so you've got this dynamic that we're describing right now. To overcome that, we've got to do some really important work. Powered by People, the group that I lead, is organizing volunteers to go out there and do that registration work, do that voter contact work, and then connect the dots with people about the issues they care about and the elections that will decide their future.
So I had one question, as someone who's served in elected office before, I get asked often if I plan to run for office again. And I know you've done that a couple of times. I ran for council successfully and then took a shot at running for mayor in Fort Worth, not so successfully, but I'm doing work that I continue to be passionate about. And I know that you're doing that as well. But I'm assuming you probably get asked a lot about whether you have intentions to run for office again.
I just want to be open to whatever is going to be most helpful. And here's something that I've tried to follow over the course of my life, certainly my life in politics, which is to not think about, a future campaign or election. And the reason is I just think you end up pulling your punches, and you start to become careful in ways that aren't helpful to anybody, but maybe preserve your political chances. I don't know if I've got any political chances left, but I want to go do the work, and I want to say the things that I know to be true without regard to my political prospects or my career or my future. When I was on city council, just like you, in my case in El Paso, I ended up running for Congress after that, but I would never allow myself to think about that because I knew it would get in my head, and maybe I'll vote this way to make these people happy so they'll support me when I run for Congress. And when you start making deals like that with yourself, you lose what your constituents are owed, which is your best judgment, having the courage of your convictions and just doing your job. So I am trying to follow that same philosophy, not thinking about whether, when, or if there's something else down the road, but what is it that I can do right now? What's the right thing to be doing? And for me, it's just focusing on voter registration, voter turnout, and voting rights in Texas. Those three issues, I think I can make the biggest positive difference in. And so I'm just going to stay focused on that. And if something happens down the road where, man, it's really obvious that, I would be a good candidate, and more importantly, I would be a good office holder for whatever office that is that I might seek, well, I'll be open to that. But nothing on the horizon now, nothing in my head right now.
That resonates with me so much. I mean, if you hear me saying something similar to that in answer to that question going forward, I will give you credit, because that is absolutely how I never thought I would run for office to begin with. And just being of service, I think, is...
I think another part about it is the talent pipeline, right? I think when you look at the average Texan, you ask them to name a Democrat politician. Today, it feels like the only name they'll be able to think of is you. But as us who are in the game, we know there's a lot of people and across the board. Can you talk a little bit about what you see with these upcoming talent of people who we can really have take what you kind of built and continue that momentum?
There is, first of all, excellent point. There is so much talent out there, and many of these people will become household names in short order. I mean, Colin Allred, most obviously, as the Democratic nominee, taking on Ted Cruz. He's done an exemplary job in Congress. And you mentioned bipartisanship. I mean, that guy has walked the talk better than just about anyone, running a terrific campaign, raising a ton of money. And I really think you're going to see him in a big way following this convention in El Paso in just a few weeks, really take the state by storm. You have in your neck of the woods, Clay Jenkins, who's the county judge in Dallas County. And that's a guy who really just follows a moral compass, does what he knows to be right without fear or favor. Just a great political hero. Andy Brown, county judge in Travis. Lena Hidalgo, the same in Harris County. Terrific. Christian Menifee, Chris Hollins, two young up-and-coming public servants also in Harris County. And there's James Tallarico. This guy is the best communicator I have seen in Texas, maybe that I'm seeing anywhere nationally right now. It's thrilling that he's in public office in Texas. It's wonderful that he's hitting the trail for Colin Allred. None of us should be surprised should he run in 2026 or 2028 or whenever for a statewide office. I hope it's sooner than later. And none of us should be surprised when he wins and really distinguishes himself at the national level. He's outstanding. There are a lot out there with him. So I'm so glad you brought this up, because, sometimes it looks like the sky is falling, like we're just never going to make it because we've been in the political wilderness for so long. But in that time, we've seen so many good people out there doing the work, very often unheralded and unsung, but their time is coming, and I'm really excited about it.
Well, I mean, I have one more question to kind of just ask, and it's one, thanks for the time as always, and you're always welcome back. And if you're ever in Fort Worth, we'd love to have you in person. So the other part is kind of, I guess, like understanding the dynamic between, I guess, Democratic Party county groups. You know, we have the Tarrant Democratic Party. What does the coalitions and the collaboration look like? It feels that that's also a challenge, and just everyone kind of being together as Texas Democrats and organizing together across counties. Any kind of thoughts, advice, or things we should be aware about there?
Yeah, I think it's been a real challenge in Texas. You know, I mentioned the political wilderness we've been in. Ann Richards, last Democrat to win the governorship. She did that in 1990, which really gives us an idea. Lloyd Bentsen, last Democrat to win a Senate race, 1988. It's just crazy when those words leave my mouth. That's how long it's been.
I got married in 1990, so.
Yeah, I mean, these are major milestones in our state. For many of us, major milestones in our personal lives. But in both cases, they happened a very, very long time ago. And I think in the intervening years, you've really seen a massive defunding of the Texas Democratic Party. You know, part of that is just national donors and the DNC not thinking that there's much of a competition in this state. We've proven otherwise. You know, Obama lost this state by 16 points in 2012, Hillary only by 9 in 2016, and then Biden by 5.5 in 2020. We're moving in the right direction, actually quicker than almost any other battleground state in the nation. And we have 40 electoral college votes. No state is a bigger game changer prospectively than the state of Texas. So the answer to your question is a really important one. How do we, in the face of really low investment in Texas, I think it's like $7 per prospective Democratic voter, where in Georgia it's $28 per prospective Democratic voter. We saw what happened in Georgia in 2020 and 2021. That is totally our future. If we can make the most of the talent, the skill, and the groups that you're talking about, and get some more money in this state. I've seen under the new TDP executive director a resurgence in that organization. I'm seeing local county chairs really start to make the most of what little resources they have. And then there are organizations, lots of them across the state. Ours, Powered by People, is calling all available volunteers to get their volunteer deputy registrar's certification to go out there at any college campus, community college campus, naturalization ceremony, concert, church service, wherever we can go legally and find people who are unregistered, eligible, and likely Democrats, get them signed up on the rolls, and then stay in touch with them going forward. We're trying to knit that coalition across the 254 counties. And in so doing, finding a lot of great help from local parties, a lot of great help from everyday folks who've never been engaged or participating before. And I hope that is our small contribution to the answer to your question. But you're right. We've got to do that if we're going to realize this potential that we have here in Texas.
Well, Beto, thank you for your time today on the 817 podcast. It's been a joy, and I think we've been doing this for 3 years. So to get to this moment where we get to talk to you is a very special one for us. So thank you for the time.
Yeah, we really appreciate it.
Likewise, and I hope to be able to do it in person with you all soon.
Felipe wanted me to say hello to you, so hello from Felipe.
He's one of my great Fort Worth memories and one of our great supporters and just a wonderful person. So please tell him that I said hello too.
Will. So that was really great to be able to sit down with Beto today. He's been in Fort Worth numerous times in the past, and we appreciate him taking the time to share with us the work that he's working on now. It was interesting to talk to him a little bit about kind of our common stories of the places that we have served, he and I both being former council members, and questions about what he sees in the future. We just appreciate his continued advocacy for trying to make Texas the best place that it can possibly be.
Yeah, we don't deserve this guy. He's incredible, super inspiring every time. He's just a good person. He makes you believe. He makes you fired up, and
It's funny that you say we don't deserve him, because my brother literally said that to me when he didn't win his last election. He was like, I don't think you all deserve him.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, we're going to go into wins and losses. This is a part of the show where we highlight a win or a loss this week in Fort Worth, Tarrant County, sometimes state. And so we start with our losses and we end with our wins. And what is your loss?
Well, this loss just fell in my lap this morning as we were preparing to do this podcast. And I think last week we were going on and on about the reporters in town that we appreciate because we rely so heavily on the stories in our local publications of news. But we noticed on a Facebook post this morning that Sandra Sedick, who works for the Fort Worth Report, announced that she is leaving the Fort Worth Report and going back to school. So this is the second time we've lost a great reporter to grad school. So that's interesting. I guess they come here and
maybe not even be the second. It probably could be way more than that. And if we probably tracked even more of them to have less.
Well, I think leaving, there's definitely been more, but to specifically go back to grad school, I know Luke Ranker with the Star-Telegram went to grad school. I'm not sure what she's going to be studying, but we were lucky to have her here for the time that we did, and we wish her all the best in her future endeavors, but, that's going to be a hole.
Yeah, Sandra Sadek was probably my favorite reporter. I mean, when I just looked at, man, I would, before not even looking at the line of who wrote it, I was just, man, this is such a good article. Who wrote it? It was often Sandra's name. And so, we can't have nice things, it feels like. That's what it is, so it feels really sad.
I know they have hired quite a few new people recently, so hopefully somebody...
And they look like kids, and I'm saying that,
well,
and I'm a
she looks
kid.
pretty young herself. She's not an older person. A lot of the people that the news...
Yeah, I saw Jacob Sanchez, Miranda, Miss Miranda, and then Emily Wolf at the Black Coffee the other day, and I like to say hi and what's up because I'm a legit one of those people who are like fans of journalists. Like I'm like a fangirl for like journalists, like big time. Like I love these people because they do so important work. And Jacob showed me like a new reporter, and I thought the kid was in high school. And so, but it was a new education reporter. It was a nice person.
So that's definitely a loss, and we'll miss Sandra and hopefully continue to support our local journalists to continue to do a good job here in Fort Worth.
Yeah, my loss is we just had the tornado here and the north of fortunate for us, we just had some trees and branches break, but there's people who literally lost their homes and lost their lives from a tornado. And what we know about this tornado season, this has been the most active tornado season since 2017. And, it just shows you the impact of whatever you think or see about climate. Our climate impacts lives and not just the quality, the existence of life. Okay. And I just feel bad that, whatever happened in this case, there's people who actually lost a lot. And some of it was children. And so I never take it for granted. Just think about all the incidences that come around with weather in Dallas-Fort Worth. And instead of talking about these important things on how to build structures and systems for sustainability, we had, conventions about other things that are distractions, going back to like not all things that public officials do is partisan. It's literally just parts of making sure that we have a world and cities and towns that people can feel safe, supported, and stabilize our weather patterns. So big loss for Texas.
Very, very scary.
What was your win?
So my win was that we had a celebration this week for the reopening of the Forest Park pool. This pool has had a long and storied history, and over the service of several council members have, come to be now a very large investment to completely rebuild the pool so that it will last for a long time going into the future. And so at the celebration was former council member Joel Burns, current council member Elizabeth Beck, and me sandwiched in the middle. Maybe did something to help it move forward, but there was a lot of people there to celebrate. I will say that I hope that this win of rebuilding the Forest Park pool will result in future facilities that are as robust and beautiful in locations across our community. Because this is a very well-served neighborhood that this pool is located in. People come from all over to go there, but we only have a couple of pools that are fully run by the city of Fort Worth. And I know there are people out there who believe, and based on the numbers of children that drowned every year, I'm turning my win into a loss. I'm sorry to say. But I just want to reiterate the importance of water safety and learning to swim and having facilities like this where folks can do those things. And hopefully that will result in more wins of more facilities of this type.
Yeah. My win, which was actually a win, it's an endorsed win by Ann, and that is Spanish is now on My Fort Worth app. And if we looked at who's the highest data user of My Fort Worth app, it would be Ann Zeta.
And I don't use the Spanish version, that's for sure, but I definitely am happy to see this.
But we now have a Spanish version, and I think that's great. I live in a zip code where the majority of people in our household speak Spanish. And so obviously this is great to get us more connected to what is going on. And yeah, so that's the win. And we'll go from there. All right, beautiful people. We just ended our episode. Hopefully you're able to listen to this after a long extended weekend. And you got to see how Beto O'Rourke talked about Tarrant County. And when Tarrant County moves, it moves Texas. And so let's continue to do this work that we do every day to stay informed and make good decisions and fight for the things we fight for. You guys have been a great group. And make sure you subscribe and share with other Fort Worthians.
Thanks for joining us.
Follow us like double tap. Now they control your life, Dopamine swipe. Dopamine swipe. Follow us like double tap. Now they control your life.